broken ground, trying to get permits. So you can see there's a huge gap there between what by law they have to have by these dates and what's actually anywhere in the pipeline. And the fear here, my fear, is that when you get this type of shortage between demand and supply, you're going to see huge price spikes for this type of energy. We're already seeing those here. California recognized they couldn't meet their goals for their renewable standard within the state of California, so they've told their utilities you can go shop anywhere in the West to buy renewable projects to meet the in-state California standard. And since they've done that, the price for wind has gone from about $85 a megawatt hour, or 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour, up to about $120 to $140 a megawatt hour, just because that's the price they pay down in California for electricity. So we're very concerned about this, the difference. So when we talk about trying to expedite permitting, trying to get more projects in the pipeline, it kind of comes down to doing this. If you get huge price spikes, then the fear is that people that want renewable energy, but when they start seeing their bill doubling, are going to push back on us and say, that's not going to work, we need to change the law and have smaller goals. I would not like to see that. I think we have reasonable goals. We just need to make sure that, we provide a pathway to get there.
This is the thing that's been, one of the things that's been very frustrating to me for several years, is there's a real ethical issue here. And we're always talking about the monetary cost, but there's a very serious cost that goes way beyond money. And we're really running out of time. So how are we going to fix this problem now? Van Jones is now in the White House talking about green jobs. What I'm really interested to know is how quickly is that going to become a reality? How quickly is that type of support going to creating more opportunities, so we'll have more competition and more people providing these kinds of services? Do you have any idea how that's going to play out?
I don't. I can tell you to me there's what the media has as the issues, and then there's what the real issues are in this area. And one of the things that people forget, one of the disservices I think utilities do in the way we bill for electricity is that when you get your bill, you get a cost that represents the full portfolio cost of all that utilities generation resources. So there's assets within there that were paid for 30 years ago that are fully depreciated off. I was talking earlier when Palo gets all of its system from basically all of its energy from the Columbia system, and when they built those dams, it was the most expensive electricity ever built in the world. If it wasn't for a war and the need for electricity for aluminum and irrigation and so forth, there was no way you could ever justify in today's marketplace building those dams at that cost for electricity. Anything you build today, I don't care what it is, it's going to be the most expensive electricity in the marketplace. And
is that because they're huge providers? Wouldn't it defer the cost if there were smaller, localized generating systems?
Yeah, that's one of the questions that I'm going to kind of get to up here in a bit, but there's a trade-off in that, particularly when it comes to transmission, right? When you start factoring the transmission cost versus local generation, that's when you start leveling the playing field a little bit. But my point here is that when people look at their cost of electricity, right, and it's, let's say it's 7 cents a kilowatt hour on your bill, that doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people. I mean, do I really care if I buy a more inefficient, refrigerator at that? Now, if you're in California and San Diego and you're paying 14 cents, double the cost, it means a little bit more to people, and they start responding because they don't want to pay the money for it. And I think the disservice we do is that when you see that 7 cents, that doesn't reflect the true cost. If you decide to put a jacuzzi in and heat it with electricity, the extra energy it takes to heat that hot water is not really reflected in your bill. You're seeing the cost of what the current use was at 7 cents. Anything new, so like I said, wind is 85 cents, $85 a megawatt hour wholesale, 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour wholesale. By the time it gets through the distribution system, it's actually costing about 11 to 12 cents. So that extra 10 watts you're using a month or whatever it is actually costing a third more than what you were what the previous cost was. I'm not sure if I'm explaining this very well. My point being is that one of the things that British Columbia started doing, which I really like, is when you get your bill up there, they have what they call your heritage power. You get one bill listed for the cost of the electricity that you use based upon their existing hydro system they built up in British Columbia, and you get a separate bill for all the new power they're buying at that actual cost on your bill. So it actually gives you a much better sense to what the true cost of energy is, and extra energy use versus the depreciated cost of energy. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that very well, but one of the big problems here is that people don't understand all that in the general public, I don't think, and so it gets very hard to have some of these debates about a path to a cleaner energy future when they're thinking, oh, it's going to cost double. Well, it's not going to cost double. It's cost double versus things you paid for 30 years ago, but versus all the new stuff, you're talking about maybe 20-30% difference between some of the more expensive renewable stuff versus coal and some of the other stuff that's available in natural gas out in the marketplace. I got really long-winded in that, sorry.
But Alcoa's going to have something like that this fall or something. They're going to start. You get a base rate from the history, and then the new stuff they're going to have to go out and buy at the full market rate.
Right.
So you get some of that. Yeah,
absolutely. And Palco's been really progressive in this area, so I don't want to downplay that they've not been at the forefront trying to deal with some of this problem, because they see that the Bonneville's not going to be able to supply all their power for the next 20 years. They're going to have to get it from other resources, which is why Randy and the board over here is paying a premium for solar and other. They've got a very high rate that they're paying for locally generated electricity. I'm just putting this up here for demonstrative purposes. These are all the new projects in our region, and the different colors. If you want to know what the colors are, I can tell you. But these are the most important transmission projects, high voltage transmission projects. But the reason I like putting this up, I think everybody have the next slide or not? No, I don't. So anyway, the reason I want to show this is that there's a bunch of wind projects on this, and when you look at the Rockies in Idaho, the only windy place in Idaho isn't on a little stretch between Boise, right up to Washington State. There's actually, so all these light blue down here, this big cluster here, are all wind projects coming online and they're coming up all within 15 miles of a new transmission line. And these are all high voltage lines, and so I can just kind of, they're expecting a 4,000 megawatt build out of wind down in the Columbia Gorge. There's big wind development here. One of the windiest spots in all of North America is actually up here in the Blackfoot Indian Reservation, but there's no transmission anywhere near it, so that's why you don't see any projects proposed.
What does that mean, transmission, just someplace to?
It requires infrastructure and cables to transmit the power.
Yeah.
And it's such a rural area that it would probably not be a good idea to have heavy equipment go in and tear the place to pieces for transmission anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the issue here is that Montana is difficult as far as getting right away. This here is actually a new line. The weakest area in the western grid is actually all along this area here, so that's why you see a lot of new lines being added. A lot of the resources are in the more rural areas. So like all this red down here is geothermal, I believe, and the light blue is wind. All these blue projects are different types of hydro projects. All the ones up in British Columbia are what they call run-of-river hydro. So these are small weirs or impoundments very high up above natural fish barriers. There's actually 643 of them under some form of permitting right now up in BC. One of the more interesting lines is this one, which you can barely see off the coastline here. PG&E, which is the San Francisco utility, is looking at building a line from the Queen Charlotte Islands underwater cable all the way down the coast, coming into Alstom down here, Oregon, and coming back out and going down to San Francisco. And they're spending $12 billion assessing the renewable resources in British Columbia, which is more than all 5 western states and the 3 provinces combined are spending assessing our own renewable resources. One of the interesting things about this is that we actually, there's another slide that shows this better when I come to it, but there's new technology for those underwater cables that's it's not as expensive, and you can do more what they call uploading and downloading of different generation resources off of it. So they do build out the potential for offshore wind and offshore geothermal and stuff will be actually a lot higher. It's a challenge for us because almost our entire coastline is marine sanctuary park off the Olympic Peninsula, and that's a real challenge.
Just one quick question
Yeah.
on that power. Is that a power transfer